What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the channel. In today's video, we're going to be doing a regular season recap for the London Bulldogs. It's been a while since I've done a video on the channel concerning the Bulldogs, and this is a really good time to do so because we were able to have a very successful season, and we were able to lock up the 1 seed on the ARC side. So the first place that I want to start is with the playoff bracket. We'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll move into some of the statistics and player ratings and things of that nature. Starting with the playoff bracket, though, you'll see that we're only going to actually get the ARC side of things. The NRC is, of course, split into a different file. For those of you that may not be familiar with the way that it works, you can only relocate a certain number of teams into each file, so it has to be split across 2. But we were able to lock up the number 1 seed in the ARC with a 15-2 record. And the other matchups that are going to be happening here are the Voyagers against the Riverhogs, the Miners against the Sentinels, and the Cougars and Celtic Tigers. So there are a lot of very formidable opponents that could potentially be matched up against us in the next round, and certainly some opponents that we've faced already this season, like the Sentinels, the Celtic Tigers, for example. So I think that this is going to be a very interesting playoffs because a lot of these teams have been pretty hot towards the end of the season, and definitely going to be looking forward to seeing who our matchup is going to be in the divisional round of the playoffs, and hopefully we can get a good win there and send ourselves on to a conference championship game and hopefully eventually a Relo Bowl. However, the next thing that we definitely need to jump into is the awards that we are potentially going to win for our team. And again, these are not official. They've not been officially announced or anything like that, and the league may even decide to do, voted awards and things like that by Commissioner Smitty and whatnot. But it certainly goes to say that, from a perspective of our offense and our defense, we've had a extremely successful season, and we'll dive into the team stats a little bit. But you guys will see right here on the screen, Timmy Merritt had a fantastic season, 4,700 yards, a 38 touchdown, and 9 interception season. He had one of the best quarterback ratings of any quarterback in the ARC. Now, this is not necessarily compared to the NRC file either, but certainly a player that I feel may be given superstar by the game, and I hope is given superstar by the game. He certainly deserves it at this point in his career, especially after having his best season as a starter for the Bulldogs in this league. And then in the rushing stats, we did have the leader in rushing yards, at least in the ARC file, and I know that there was something going on with Kingston Kenny and his stats, but nonetheless, we had an MVP candidate in Matt Wheaton, who is very likely going to win that award for the ARC side, who had 1,900 rushing yards and 21 touchdowns. That's not to mention any of his receiving contributions, but he did really well for us, and he really came into his own as a player for the team this year, and I'm really excited for the future of Matt Wheaton and what he can potentially do for us in the playoffs. Next up, on the receiving side of things, we had significant contributions across the board from the key players that we would expect to contribute. Saul Leckie had 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns. Stanley Whitehead had 1,011 touchdowns, and he missed 4 or 5 weeks worth of time, so that just speaks to how good of a player he truly is. Jake Winkleman, the rookie, came in for 800 plus yards and 6 touchdowns, and Reggie Streeter really stepped into his own this year with 600 plus yards and 4 touchdowns. We did have some other contributions from guys further down on the roster here. You can see a couple of touchdowns and a couple of 100 yards here and there from guys like Anthony Connell, for example, but really we were headlined by those big receivers, each of them getting 70 catches, and the rookie coming in with 59. On the defensive side of the ball, though, I really want to talk a little bit about the ARC sack leader in Drew Brewer, who had a massive comeback season from his rookie year where he did not perform up to the expectations of the league. He comes back this year, he puts on a show with 20 sacks throughout the entire season, and this is a guy that, teams have to scheme against him, and they do scheme against him, and he still manages to get 20 sacks, which is absolutely huge. 9.5 sacks from Willis Savage on the opposite side of him. I wish we could have gotten double-digit sacks, but we were half a sack off. Jermaine Taylor, the rookie, coming in with 8.5 sacks, certainly going to be the lead candidate for Defensive Rookie of the Year. I would be shocked if he did not win that award, but certainly going to be one of, if not the best, interior pass rushers within this league, and he has run-stopping capability capability as well, and he's super young. Jack Brodine had 5.5 sacks, and really his contributions mainly came into play in the run game, getting 47 tackles and 10 TFLs. I think maybe a little overshadowed by the successes of Jermaine Taylor this year, but nonetheless still a key contributor to the defense. Leading in tackles for the team was the recent addition, Duke Pascal, and actually all of the additions that we had in the offseason led in tackles. So number 1, Duke Pascal, number 2, Brandon Oliver, who we traded for off the Black Knights, and number 3, Jacoby Haskins, who we traded for off of the Diablos. So 3 of our offseason acquisitions really leading the team, leading the way in statistics. And like I said, the top of the league here in sacks was Drew Brewer, at least on the ARC side. And then in the interception category, we had Isaac Lockhart, who finished second in interceptions with 6. And then we had Jacoby Haskins, Matthew Hall with 4, Shaquille Tiller added 3, Duke Pascal, the linebacker, even added 3. So fantastic contributions there. One of the things that I definitely want to point out, however, are the forced fumbles that we were able to get off of this team. There's a lot of players that have forced a fumble here across our defense, but nonetheless, Jacoby Haskins and Brandon Oliver leading the ARC side with 4 apiece. So that's a fantastic addition, and both of those guys are new to the team. So you can really see how these additions to the team really worked out for us this year. And then the final thing that I want to talk about statistically from this perspective on a player-by-player basis is Michael Flota, who had, I think, 171 points total if you total this up. Now, he did have a 79% field goal percentage. That is brought down a lot by NFL games, simulations that we don't actually play, that he missed field goals in. His field goal percentage is actually better than that. And the other thing to factor in there is that because of his really strong leg, they'll have him take longer field goals than you might otherwise take with another kicker. And so the accuracy and the awareness play into not necessarily being perfect from that long range. And next up, we got to talk about our team statistics, because these are very important to tell the story of how the season has gone for us and how good this team actually is. And to start off, just taking a look at the offensive stats, we were the #1 offense in terms of offensive yardage and the #1 offense in terms of points per game. So sorting by total offensive yards here, 6,700, the only team in the ARC filed to achieve that. And on a points per game side of things, 35.5 points per game, which is honestly well above pretty much the rest of the league whenever you take a look at things on the ARC side. Now, when we take a look at passing yardage, we were not necessarily near the top in passing yardage, and that is something worth considering. And that's, you know, I guess we were kind of near the top here, so we were number 6. We weren't in the top 5, however. In rushing yardage, though, we were number 2. So, you know, you can tell that the offense has been extremely successful for us on the season, and that's a turn in the right direction and what we wanted to accomplish with this team. And really, you can see the balance here between the rushing and the passing yards, a balance that is not achieved by many other teams. You see teams like the Pioneers, who were relatively successful this year, and the Aviators, who were relatively successful this year, but above all else, we were able to put the ball into the end zone, which is massive for us and massive for a team. One of the sayings that I've picked up here in the RFL is that it's a race to 30, and if you can win that race to 30 more than often than not, you're going to win the game. And that's kind of what the story of our season has been. When you win that race to 30, you're going to win the game. And then we can talk a little bit about defensive statistics. In terms of total yardage allowed on the defensive side of the ball, we are at the top, and it's basically a game difference between us and everybody else, which is kind of crazy. 4,600 yards compared to everybody else who allowed over 5,000 yards. Our defense has been absolutely stellar for us this year. They have not let us down. We've played 2 tough games against the Sentinels that we lost, but unfortunately unable to come away with victories in those games. Nonetheless, though, our defense has done a very good job pretty much all the way around of not allowing a lot of yards, not allowing a lot lot of points. We are not first in points allowed. That is actually the Miners, who have an amazing defense. They get a lot of pressure. They get a lot of turnovers. You can see 80 sacks by the Miners defense, 8 forced fumbles, 19 interceptions. Actually, that's fumble recoveries. But nonetheless, we were not quite there in terms of sack total or anything like that. We were near the top in interceptions, which is fantastic. We were technically near the top, number 6 in sacks generated, but nonetheless, we would like to still continue to improve in those turnover categories, those pressure categories, but a huge step in the right direction, finishing number 1 in defense and number 1 in offense for the ARC side certainly is what propelled us to the number 1 seed and a shot at contention in the playoffs for our first time since season 1. And really the final thing that I want to do here is just give you guys a little bit of a look at the team and how they stand right now in terms of their overalls, their progression and everything like that since the season began, if you guys have been following along, and since prior seasons. And, you know, one of the things that we certainly want to take a look at is the fact that a lot of these players are getting morale bonuses right now. You can see a lot of +3s, +4s, temporary bonuses that don't necessarily directly count into a player's overall. These are things that we certainly want to, you know, consider as we're looking at the team, but nonetheless, there has been fantastic progression from this roster as a whole. So we have a lot of really productive players on the offensive side of the ball. On the defensive side of the ball, though, that's where most of the changes have occurred. I mean, this offense has generally been together since I've taken over the team. I mean, a lot of these players have been here. The wide receivers have been here, minus Jake Winkleman. Matt Wheaton's been around. Timmy Merritt's been around. I did add Reggie Streeter, but Moffitt was here. Corona was here. McBride was here. We did add the additions of Hickman and Higgins, but, you know, you can see that the majority of the core of the offense has been here for this team. Where a lot of the changes have come in is the defense for this team, where Jermaine Taylor is new, and we mentioned his 8.5 sacks earlier. Drew Brewer is a new addition to the team with 20 sacks now in this season. Shaquille Tiller starting for us was an addition. Isaac Lockhart was an addition. Brandon Oliver and Jacoby Haskins were added this offseason. Greg Davidson was an addition. Duke Pascal, but Shane Masters was here previously. You can see a lot of the progression by these guys. We have a lot of superstar and X-Factor players, and again, that is another reason why we are having success this season. Having those players that have those traits that allow them to perform well in big moments and clutch moments is absolutely massive for a team that wants to have a title shot, and that's something we've been trying to do, is really generate turnovers, generate pressure, and increase our productivity in those various aspects, and that's something you can see really starting to mesh well with this roster. So, you know, hopefully you guys at least enjoyed getting to see a little bit of an update, getting to see some of the stats and whatnot, see how the players finished in this season. Big shout out to all the guys in the Bulldogs locker room, guys like Drew Brewer, Jermaine Taylor, Jake Winkleman, Jay Morris, who actually had a pretty solid role for this team this year as a third down back. You know, all those guys, and I know that I'm missing some names. Michael Flota, for example, who's now an 80 overall. Big shout out to all of those guys for their continued efforts to continue to help upgrade their players and progress this team in the right direction and to show up to the games and whatnot. Hopefully you guys watching on the channel will show up for all of the Bulldogs playoff games. It may only be one game. It's very possible. This is my first appearance as a coach in the playoffs, and that'll be in 2 weeks. We're going to have the wild card week this week, and then next week we'll find out who our opponent is, and we'll take on our first challenge in the playoffs. But I do hope that you guys on the channel will tune in, will pay attention on the RFL channel for when that happens, and hopefully you guys will continue to pick up the support for this team and take the Bulldogs to the next level. So with all that being said, like I said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, leave a like down below, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video, and I hope you have a good one.